The Fletcher Seventh-day Adventist Church is a Christian people who believe Jesus is the Son of God, the hope of the world, who died on the cross to redeem us all for eternal life with God. Our purpose is to lift Jesus up and love people in. Visit our website at www.fletchersda.org. And now be blessed by the Holy Spirit as you listen to a Bible message.
Please turn to me to Deuteronomy 30, 19 through 20. This day I call the heavens and the earth as witness against you that I have set before your life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life so that you and your children may live, and that you may love the Lord your God. Listen to his voice, hold fast to him, for the Lord is your life, and he will give you many years in the land he swore to give your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. May the Lord add a blessing to the reading of his word.
God, we've come into this place because it's your Sabbath, because you are God. And God, we've carried in many things on our hearts, things that we're maybe excited about that are distracting us, things that are holding us down and distracting us in that way. But God, we pray that you would just speak to us now as we open your word, God. And I pray that the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts would be pleasing in your sight. God, you who are the rock that we stand on, and the rescuer that comes for us when we fall off that rock. We love you because you first loved us, Jesus. We ask this all in your name. Amen. So my best friend, or one of my best friends, there's two of them. They married each other, which is awesome, guy and a girl. I was like, that's convenient. I can visit one plane ticket and see both my best friends. She went to the park one day with her children, and her kids were just kind of playing around and doing their thing, and then she's sitting there on this park bench, and as she's sitting there just kind of like thinking about something, she's kind of distracted, her attention was suddenly pulled back to the present as this little kid came up and said, "Hi." And she looked over, and there's this little girl, just kind of cute little kid, just real friendly, like, "Hi." And so she's like, "Hello." Like, "Who are you?" You're like, "I'm so-and-so." Like, "Okay, I'm so-and-so." Just staring at her. She's like kind of getting creeped out, like, what's next? Looking at her. My friend is just not in a good mood that day. She's starting to get irritated, like, who is this little kid? Like, leave me alone. I don't even know who you are. Just stand there staring at her. And this little girl finally breaks the silence. She looks, she says, "I love you." Right? And we're like, oh, sweet. My friend was not in a sweet mood. She was in a super sarcastic, bitter mood that day. I don't know why. But she looked at this little girl. She's like, "How do you love me? You don't even know me." And the little girl was like, "Oh," and the little girl's mother kind of watched all this unfolding and came running over to get her kid. She's like, "I'm sorry, she's bothering you," and pulled her daughter away. And as they walked away, my friend heard this come out of the mother's mouth. Not so she could hear it intentionally, but she overheard her as she whispered to her little daughter. She's like, "It's okay, don't feel bad. That lady probably doesn't know Jesus." My friend's a pastor. And she was like, "Ow. I do bad thing." Super fail, down in flames. She's like, "Wow, who am I? I'm a total monster," right? But the thing is that as we're going through this series on the Ten Commandments, I hope that that's the experience all of us have at some point as we're reading through these commandments. Because as we read through the Ten Commandments, what is supposed to happen is not that we're able to look at these and say, "Man, I got that one nailed down." Right? I'm following Jesus super well. I've got this. I'm a pastor, right? My friend could have very easily, if you would have asked her before all that happened in that moment, do you feel like your relationship with God is relatively strong or on the weak side, kind of where at? And she would have answered honestly, because I know her very well, "I'm not perfect, but I feel like, God and I are really kind of pretty close." And she is, right? In that moment, kind of the reality was revealed, wasn't it? And she saw her heart that, maybe I'm not exactly where I need to be. And as we read through these commandments, I think it's very easy for us to look at what the basic words are: don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't worship other gods, right? And to say with honesty, I think I've got this one nailed down, right? I don't have any idols. There's some things I might struggle with, but I feel like I'm committed to God. Haven't murdered anybody? Maybe I have. Just seeing if you're awake. You know, it's easy to kind of check that list off and be like, you know what, I've pretty much got this nailed down. But then Jesus comes along and ruins everything, because that's how he rolls. He comes into the scene and he's like, oh yeah, you think you haven't committed adultery? How many of you have thought lustful thoughts? And suddenly all of us are like, that's awkward. It's like, yeah, I'm thinking of it about the same thing he says, pretty much the same thing. How many of you have murdered? Well, no, we haven't murdered. How many of you hated somebody? Oh, awkward silence ensues, right? And Jesus kind of rips the facade off a little bit and leaves us with this uncomfortable reality that we might not be following these things as well as we would like to believe that we are. And the one that we're looking at today, the sixth commandment, I think is probably one of the commandments that's the easiest to feel like we haven't broken. But when we look at what Jesus says, I think the reality is it's probably one of the easiest to break. The one that all of us are probably the most guilty of out of any of them, possibly. Thou shalt not murder. So I want to go into the words of Jesus this morning with you. The commandment has just those few little words, thou shalt not kill, don't murder people, right? Like drop the mic and walk away. All right, we're like, yeah, don't kill people. Yeah, fair enough, it's cool. But Jesus comes along and he kind of opens that up a little more. And I want to spend the time we have this morning kind of looking at that. And I've got the help from Candy now, so I can go all day long. Thanks, seniors. Chocolate. Delicious. Now I wish I had water. A series of bad decisions. If you open your Bibles to Matthew 5 with me, we're going to spend most of our time here this morning. As Jesus takes that commandment, thou shalt not murder, and he takes it from a few words and he opens it up quite drastically here. I want to start in chapter 5, verse 21, and we'll go down to verse 24 here. I'm just going to read through this. I'll give you a chance to hear the rustling here for a minute here. And you've read this before, but I want to encourage you to kind of step back from this and think how this would sound to you if you had heard this for the first time. If you were standing with Jesus out on this mountainside and he starts preaching this, how this might have impacted you. And he says this, you've heard that it was said to people long ago, do not murder. And they're like, yeah, we heard that. And anyone that murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to the judgment. Again, anyone who says to his brother, Raka, is answerable to the Sanhedrin, but anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First, go be reconciled with your brother, and then come and offer your gift. The first thing that Jesus kind of reveals to us here is that what we define as murder is quite different than what God defines as murder, isn't it? We would say that murder would be the taking of someone's life, that physically you end their life, they're dead, they're not around anymore, sayonara, it's over. But Jesus says, okay, yeah, that's definitely murder, but he says the definition for me is quite more expansive than that. He says, if we have anger in our hearts for someone, and there's translations that have kind of added that in without cause later, but most translations will put that at the bottom of the page because they say this was only in later manuscripts. It wasn't in early manuscripts. And it makes sense because how many of you have ever been angry without a reason? Have you ever been angry without a reason? If you have psychological issues because anger should come from a reason. It might be a valid reason or an invalid reason, but there's got to be something that made you angry. So angry without a cause, right? Really? Like, where's that? So suddenly it becomes, well, if I'm angry and I have a reason, that's okay then, right? That really what Jesus is saying? It doesn't even make sense. Because if you've got this anger at your brother, and there's like this break in the relationship between you, and you're there at the altar bringing something to God, does God want that offering? It's like, I don't even want your stuff, man. It's like, just take it. Go. till you deal with that over there. He said, you in my mind are the same as a murderer. You're someone who's actually taken the life of someone as far as I'm concerned. Go fix that, right? Luckily, you haven't murdered them. You still can fix it. If you murder them, there's no coming back. The person's gone. He says, you can fix it. How many of you have been angry before? How many of you have been ashamed of your anger before? I have a buddy of mine, and this really is a buddy, it's not me. I have a friend who did this thing. I'll tell a story on him. He was driving to school. I was teaching out in Washington. He's one of my students there. We've kept in touch since then. And he had this really frustrating experience. In Seattle, the drivers are ridiculous. Like, it rains the tiniest little bit, and they just traffic comes to a grinding halt, which makes no sense because it's always raining there. Right? Like if it was Arizona and people freaked out with the rain, I'd be like, fair enough. You don't know what you're doing. Be scared. Seattle, it's like, this is all you know. But anyway, people just come to a screeching halt. The idea that you should drive faster in the left lane, slower in the right lane, nobody understands. It's just jammed full of traffic. I see the McDonald's over here nodding their head. Yeah, they know what I'm talking about. It's really, really infuriating. And so you're out on this road, and my buddy was out in this traffic trying to get to school that morning, and the traffic was just stopped up. People are in the wrong lanes. Everyone's just blocking his way. And he finally is able to break through traffic, right? You ever done that? Like Mario Kart style. He's weaving through traffic, finally breaks through, and he's home free until one other car pulls in front of him. He's like, no! And he thinks it's the devil himself just trying to ruin his day in that car, right? So he tries to get around, and he can't. And so he gets mad at that point, and he starts tailgating this person. He's like, get over. And the person won't get over. And he's just on this person's bumper, and he actually starts honks a couple times. He's saying some choice words. He's just insanely angry. This person's going to make him late. He's trying to get where he's going. And so he's flying through traffic. This person won't get out of his way and gets into town where he's supposed to go. And that same person exits at the exit he's supposed to exit at. He's like, oh, angry. What's so stupid? Then they get down to the stoplight and they turn left, and he's supposed to turn left too. And he's angry, but now he's a little more worried. Wait, I wonder how far they're going to be in front of me. Next stoplight. They go the same direction he's supposed to go. Every turn he takes, they're in front of him. So they don't know what he's doing. They're doing it first, and he's starting to get concerned. Finally, he pulls up to a parking lot he's going to pull into, and it's a Starbucks. And the car in front of him turns right in there. He pulls up beside this car, and he looks over, and it's this girl that's one of the workers at that Starbucks that he really, really liked. She's the sweetest person he's ever known. And he sat there just in absolute shock and shame. He's like, I am such a monster. And he jumps out of the car and he's apologizing. He's like, I am so sorry. I didn't even know it was you. And that probably shouldn't matter because I'm just a jerk. And she was super nice about it. But the guy just was absolutely distraught. He came to class that day. He walked into class with his head hung, just what's up, buddy? He's like, I hate myself so much. But how many of us, when we have the opportunity that we don't think it's going to matter, that who's going to know, no one's going to find out I'm this angry, how many of us, if we let our true feelings out, would find ourselves in the same situation? That we're tailgating somebody that we find out we actually care about, and it suddenly becomes aware that's what we're doing. How many of us would end up in that same place? And the reality is that the thing that hit me as he told me this story was, first of all, I'm like, yeah, I've done that before, and I've been ashamed of myself for the way I drove. And I'm glad no one knew who it was me, right? But the second thing I thought was that, you know what, in reality, all of us are driving to the same place, aren't we? We're all headed to the throne of God. And all of the things that we do, all of the things that we say, all of the anger that we have in our hearts, the Bible says, will be revealed. It says the secret things will be made known. And it will be like we're driving into that parking lot and we pull in and the person gets out and it's someone we know and we're like, wow, I have no excuse for my behavior. That was absolutely atrocious. We all step out in front of the throne of God. Are we tailgating people to eternity? Jesus says that he's watching for that. And the words that Jesus spoke had to make the people uncomfortable as they heard them, and I believe that they should make us feel uncomfortable as we hear them. We can easily say we don't murder, but how many of us have wished ill of somebody, right? And maybe justly. We can say, well, that person really was disrespectful to me, and so I'm really happy when something bad happens to them, right? Jesus says that even if we have that in our hearts, he says that in his mind is murder. And so Jesus, first of all, here describes murder in his mind, not just as taking of life, but as passing a verdict on somebody, where we decide that person's deserving of being mistreated, that person's deserving of some bad behavior on our part. Like, I'm going to be angry at this driver because they're driving bad, right? We make excuses, right? Someone said, well, why are you driving like a jerk? Well, that person cut me off. Well, does that make you not accountable for your behavior still? Does someone else's bad behavior validate my bad behavior? My parents had this line that I hated when I was a kid, when my brother and I would be fighting, or we would both do something, and they're talking to me afterwards. And I would always ask them, what about Steve? Right? What about Steve? You're grounded. What about Steve? What's happening to Steve? And my parents had this line that made me so angry. They said, let's let Steve worry about Steve. Let's let Jeff worry about Jeff. I was like, no, irrefutable logic. Checkmate. It's so easy for us to say, what about that driver? Well, that person gossiped first. Well, that person spread stuff about me, so I'm just telling other people what they said about me, that they're the one that did it, right? But Jesus says, if I have anger in my heart towards someone else, where I'm wishing ill on them, where I would be willing to assassinate their character, even with truthful things, that if I wish ill on someone, that God considers it as drastic as if I'd literally taken their life. Because when we think about it, that's the path we're on, aren't we? Most of us are emotionally mature enough that we won't go that far, we hope. Most of us are socially aware that we realize we don't want the consequences of that, so we won't go that far, right? So we check ourselves. And as Christians, God hopefully is able to stop us as well, where the Spirit of God steps in our conscience, like, hey, really? But when we step onto that road of saying, you know what, this person has done this, so therefore I'm going to do this, or therefore I wish this to happen to them. I have hate in my heart. Jesus says that's murder, passing a verdict. Another thing in the same section, he kind of like expands that as well. He says there's this word people would use, raka, which they were held accountable for. Basically, it was just this term of like a curse. Again, I wish something terrible would happen to you, right? And it was this word that people would like go to fists over. And we don't really have anything like that in our culture anymore in America, which is probably a good thing. There's nothing there's no line or even curse word that you can say to someone that you know that person's going to start swinging, right? You might know that individual person might, but most people will just say, you're an idiot, whatever, and just walk away, or they'll just yell back at you, right? You're not necessarily going to like force that person to feel like they need to defend their honor or defend their character, right? We don't really have that in our culture anymore. We used to. People would duel, right? Literally to risk killing each other because they'd said something destructive about each other, right? It might have been unfair, but literally to try and salvage their honor. So that's something we had, we don't anymore. But the closest thing I could imagine in our culture that might be similar to that would be the way that we categorize people. If you watch the news, you can see there's like these certain categories. If someone, like one of the news anchors or one of the other people being like interviewed tries to put that other person into, like it goes off the rails. One of them is racism, right? You'll see someone like, well, you're just a racist. Like the person doesn't just shrug that off. They're like, how dare you, I'm not, blah, 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 you know? Like, and you'll watch them just get like super angry because that person's pushed them into a category they don't want to be in. They're like, I'm not that, right? Whether they are or aren't isn't the point. They don't want to be included in that category. Have you guys seen that? Especially in this political season. Light your TV on fire, right? It'll be better for you. Do you notice the colors I'm wearing today? A mixture of blue and red. I figured I'd get shot at by both sides, makes it more interesting. But the categories we want to put each other into, we want to like limit people to these things like, well, if you're Republican, then you're this, right? Is it ever a positive thing? Well, you're a Republican, so, oh, I like that, right? It's usually from the other side. You're a Republican, so you're these what we see as bad categories. You're greedy, you're whatever, right? Or you're Democrat, so therefore you're what? This, right? We want to put people into these categories, not to understand them, but to devalue them, to silence them. Have you seen that? Have you participated in that? I have. And again, I'm ashamed of that. But there are times, I think we've all done that, where we look at this person and we say, because you're this, therefore I don't have to listen to you anymore. Have you seen that? And sometimes maybe it's fair, right? That's how we understand the world, we categorize the world. But I think this does need to cut deep into our own personal lives to have meaning. And if it doesn't make us squirm a little bit, I think we're missing the point of what Jesus said. If I am discounting people because of what I think they believe, even if it's true, and I say that person has less value, right? Jesus says, what road am I on? The road towards what? Well, hell, yeah, absolutely. But before that, what action am I on the road towards? Murder. Again, it doesn't mean if I say that all these people are bad or all these people are bad, I'm going to commit murder. But Jesus says, you've planted the seeds of that in your heart. You've looked at someone and said, because they're in that category, therefore they have less value. Therefore, their opinion matters less. Therefore, they don't need to be listened to. Therefore, I don't have to be respectful of that person because they're so nasty. They believe X. They believe Y. Therefore, I don't have to be courteous. Have you seen that? Like, that's what blows my mind. What disappoints me the most when these political seasons come along is that you watch the worst of human nature rise out of the swamp of who we are, don't you? And there's no political party that has a corner on this. There's no, group of supporters of any specific candidate that I think have a corner on this. Say, that person's bad enough, they're dangerous enough in my mind that I can stop acting with Christian charity, right? I'm not saying that you have to believe everything's okay. I don't think Jesus is saying that we have to try and pretend some things are right and some things are right that are not right. He says don't call things that are wrong right. It's okay to say this thing's wrong. I think this is different. I'm going to vote against this. Fair enough. But if I come to the point where I think I have an excuse for not acting with charity, kindness, hope, long-suffering, not keeping a record of wrongs, am I in the character of Christ anymore? He says, I am absolutely outside of the character of Christ. In fact, I'm on the road to hell itself, and I'm on, just within steps of actually committing murder, Jesus says. Strong, strong language. Jesus says murder is passing a verdict. Not on what you believe is right or wrong, but what you think should happen to somebody. I remember when I was in college, this will date me a little bit, or it make me seem young or old, but during college when Saddam Hussein was captured, they caught the little guy down in a hole somewhere, and everyone's like, yeah, right? And I was like, woohoo, got that loser finally, right? Total idiot. Just a bad dude. Everyone was glad to see him go. The people in his country were glad to see him go. Everyone outside his country was glad to see him go. Just a bad dude. And I remember watching this kind of fill the news cycle, and I was glad like everyone. I'm like, awesome, they finally got this guy. They're going to have a trial, bring him to justice. It's going to be good, right? And justice should happen. But I remember I had this almost like a voice in my heart as it was like God was speaking to me. And I thought, what should I want to happen to him? Should I want him to die? Should I want him to go to the end of the rope like he did? They pull the drop. Yeah, finally. And the thought came to my mind that if I'm really a follower of Jesus, my highest desire for this man would be that he would repent. Outside of whether he was held to justice or killed or not killed, that's out of my control. That's not in my control, right? That's not a moral dilemma I have to process. I don't have control of that. But I do have control of my heart. And what do I wish for him? That my wish would be that he would repent, that he would know Jesus. And I remember that really hit me because that was not the thought that I had. What's in our heart? What kind of verdict are we passing on people? Because the reality is, if we say, well, that person's bad enough, they've broken the laws of God enough, that they therefore deserve to have all kindness removed from them, all hope removed from them, when we find ourselves thinking those thoughts, ironically, we're breaking the sixth commandment, and therefore we're saying that we don't deserve kindness or justice or the charity of God, that we deserve to have all hope removed from us. Are we not? And that's the irony of what Jesus lays out. It's this devastating attack on our moral superiority where he just pulls the carpet out from under us and we're left, like my friend in the park, saying, wow, I am not what I hoped I was. I'm not what I hoped I was. Because all of us have wished ill of somebody, justified or not in our mind. All of us have said things we probably shouldn't have said. All of us have felt anger towards someone that we regretted later. And Jesus says, that's not just something that we brush off like, well, at least I'm not a murderer. He's like, bad news, actually. Like, oh, thanks, Jesus. Thanks for ruining my day, Jesus. There's a story of St. Francis of Assisi, famous person in Christian history. And he was alive during this time where European Christians went down to the Middle East and fought all these wars, these crusades. And so there was this big push, they were building these big armies and sending them off and fighting. And St. Francis had a different idea. He said, you know what? I think I want to go down there and tell people about Jesus. As a Christian, who would guess? Evil genius, right? It's like, so they're going to kill these people. I'm going to go tell them about Jesus. He is like, walks down to Egypt, across the water, just kidding. Rides his boat, gets down to Egypt, and he gets to this city that's already under siege. So they're shooting stuff at each other, and both sides are cursing each other, and infidels, heathen, ah. He walks up, he's like, hey, can I go in there? And they're like, you're a monk. Why do you want to go in there? He's like, I want to tell them about Jesus. They're like, you're an idiot. Whatever, I guess you're a monk, do whatever you want to do. And so they let the guy go into the city. He walks into the city, and the soldiers in there are like, what are you coming in here for? He's like, I'm a monk. I want to see your king or your leader. I want to tell them about Jesus. And they're like, all right, you're so weird. Go ahead. So he just walks in. What's up, king? And he hangs out with this guy during the siege. He literally risks his life to go and tell this guy about Jesus. And after all the time he spent with this guy, there was a profound idea that came out of this man's mouth. This military leader looked at St. Francis and he said, I'd like to convert to your religion because it's such a beautiful one. But we would both be murdered, wouldn't we? And St. Francis said, probably. Because neither side on that battlefield was interested in redemption for anybody else, were they? They'd drawn that line. These people are outside the category that deserves the love of God. And so for someone to step over that line and say, no, but this person kind of shot at from both sides. As Christians, as followers of God, we should be known not for falling into the same political categories, the same political attitudes, the same social attitudes, the same way we treat our enemies as the people around us. We should be known as being so much more drastically redemptive that people can just tell that we're Christians. Like the Bible says, they'll know you are my disciples if you what? If you love. If, not when. God was reasonable. He didn't say it's going to happen. He says, if you do this, they're going to know you're my disciples. If you have hate in your heart, you've committed murder, he says. But he goes on. Matthew 5:38. Check this out. Jesus expands it even more. He says, you've heard that it was said, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if someone wants to sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. If someone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who asks. Do not turn away from you the one that wants to borrow from you. And Jesus is quoting the words of God in this section, isn't he? Isn't God the one that said eye for eye, tooth for tooth? That directly was out of the mouth of God in the Old Testament. He says eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Jesus says, you've heard that it was said eye for eye, tooth for tooth, because I'd be the one that said it. So I remember that too. It was a very nice day. We had some manna, nice time on the park. And I said, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. And you said, all right, that's cool. He says, I'm telling you now, that's not enough. That's not enough. And Jesus expands it even more. He says that murder is also when we're being fair. He says, if we're being fair, he pulls the carpet out from us even more. He says, even then, when you're being fair, you are already on the path towards murder itself. Because the eye for eye, tooth for tooth command is quite profound. Back in that time, there were other commands that were similar in nations around there. And we read that now, it sounds kind of savage, right? You break my tooth out, then I'm legally allowed to do what to you? Break your tooth out, right? We get in a fight, I lose an eye, what happens to you? You're going to lose an eye, right? And it seems a little, crazy, like why would God tell them to do this? But we need to understand that this command in the Old Testament was not something that God was thinking that like you have to do this necessarily. He was saying you can only do this. Because again, when we look in our own hearts, what is our natural response when we've been wronged? We want justice, but what we think of as justice in that moment, is it really justice usually? It's not, and that's why the American system, the Western system of law is brilliant, because it really kind of takes that out of our hands. You don't get to decide what happens to that. Kind of an impartial other group gets to decide, right? And we hope that that makes it a little more fair. Because what happens is, if you grew up with brothers, anyone grew up with siblings? I don't know if girls are like this, but brothers, this is how it went with brothers, right? So I'm in my room, my little brother comes in and like knocks over my Legos. Right? So eye for eye, tooth for tooth says, oh, I get to knock over his Legos. But that's not fair. I want to punch him in the head. And so I punch him in the head and like lay him out on the ground, right? So now for eye, tooth for tooth, what's he supposed to do to me? You know, he wants supposed to punch me in the head, but he doesn't do that. He jumps up and tries to choke me out. So we're like wrestling. He's like trying to like make me go unconscious, right? We're fighting and screaming and punching each other, right? It escalated quickly. Because our version of justice is not usually what justice really is. Our version of justice is, I want to like be on top, right? You burn my house down, I want to shoot you, right? Is that equivalent? You try to steal my car, I'm going to murder you. Is that equivalent? You try to take my wallet, I'm going to kill you. Is my wallet worth your life in reality? Because what we do is not just. What we do is we want revenge, not justice. And so what God did here in the Old Testament, he limited it. He said, you can't go on some killing spree, because that's what they would do. Someone's brother murders their brother, and they go and they kill two of his brothers, right? I mean, the feuds that we've even had here in America, you know, what was the famous one up in West Virginia? You guys know? I heard Hatfields and McCoys, right? I mean, it's recent. You go over to the Middle East where there's a lot more of that like kind of like honor society still. Same thing. What happens if you bomb my village? I'm going to bomb two of your villages, right? It just escalates. And so God says, listen, I'm going to limit this. You can't go farther than this. Only up till this point, and that's it. There's other really weird laws in the Bible, in the Old Testament especially, and I'm not going to go into a lot of them because I don't have much time, and they're super weird. But the one that really caught my attention the first time I read it was this. It's a law about cooking, which you're like, why would God care about cooking, right? But he says this: if you're going to cook a young calf, it's a sin to cook that calf in its mother's milk. Why would God care? Right? And there's a lot of other weird laws, similar laws, that just have these, like, they don't seem to make any sense. Like, why would God care that, like, the lamb is cooked or the calf is cooked in its mother's milk? Until you step back and think about, what does that milk represent? That's life. That's the thing that nourishes this calf. That's the thing that would bring it life and grow it and give it the strength to grow into a fully grown creature. That is life. And the idea of putting death into life, life into death, does that lead to more value or less value of life? It devalues life. When I think that defending my wallet by taking your life is fair, am I valuing life or devaluing life? Even if you're bad. I mean, you've broken the law of God too. You're stealing from me. It's not cool. I mean, obviously I'm angry. But if I'm willing to take your life to defend my stuff, am I valuing life or devaluing life? If I'm willing to take the life of a little baby because I'm inconvenienced by carrying it to full term, am I valuing life or devaluing life? Even if I'm justified in my own mind. And I don't want to oversimplify these things. Life is full of complicated choices, and we need to be gracious and merciful and kind and understand that people make decisions in the moment that they sometimes regret. Whether that's defending their property in a way that they realize later, I took someone's life to save my stuff. Can you imagine Jesus doing that? I ended the life of a little baby because I was desperate. And sure, I was overwhelmed. I didn't know what to do, but man, I wish someone would have helped me understand there was maybe a better choice. I took a life. I've devalued life. So many of the decisions that we make in the moment are like putting this calf into this milk and just boiling this meat and not seeing the irony as the rest of the universe looks on and says, how can these people value life so little? How can these people take the thing that is the gift of God, like literally the breath of God that God breathes into the lungs of the human race, and this magical, mysterious thing that we cannot replicate comes into existence, that life pulses through our veins and fires in the neurons of our minds, and that we're these living, breathing creatures, and that we can value that so little. So Jesus says, yeah, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. That was good for then, but I'm trying to move you beyond that. There's a trajectory of the Bible, a direction it's going, that God is very clearly from the beginning saying, okay, yeah, I'm going to allow this, but I want you to move farther, right? I'm going to allow you to do this, but I want you to go farther than that. He says that about a lot of things in the Sermon on the Mount. Moses allowed this, but man, that's not my goal. I want something better for you. I want reconciliation in your relationships. Don't just give up. I allowed you to like get revenge up to a certain point, but man, I want something better for you. I want you to choose life. Being fair isn't good enough according to Jesus. You wrong me, so I wrong you. Jesus says it's not good enough. And the story that was told for the children's story was awesome because I was actually going to reference the same thing. So good job, man. It's a good story. So I won't tell it too much. How many of you guys have heard the story, Desmond Doss, before? Super, super famous story. Absolutely amazing guy. There's a movie coming out if you haven't heard about that. Any of you guys heard about that? It's called Hacksaw Ridge. Really interesting backstory. I had always wondered why no one had made the movie, right? Because it's a brilliant story. This guy that does everything to follow his conscience and ends up, getting this Medal of Honor. Like, why didn't they make the story, right? I mean, it's a good movie. It would sell. But I found out recently that someone had written the screenplay, and the family had kind of the final say on that. And they took it to all these different movie producers, and they had one stipulation. They said, we understand you probably need to change the story a bit for the movie. It's understandable, fair enough. But you have to, promise to include the religious aspect. Because, that's the story. And so many people were like, nah, we just can't. We don't think it'll sell. Take it to someone else. We wish you well. We just don't think it'll sell, so we're not going to put money into it. They finally got to the director who's doing it now, Mel Gibson, and he was like, absolutely, I'll put in the religious aspect of that. So he made the movie. I'm not encouraging you to go see it necessarily. It's rated R because it's violence. If you know anything about Mel Gibson, he likes blowing people up in movies. And so I have friends that have seen it. They say it's quite graphic. But that's the rating, just so you know. The rating is it's just from the violence, the war scenes is what that's from. It's not from other things. So the story is made, this story of Desmond Doss. It's absolutely incredible. The movie just played a few months back for the opening, the big premiere. And so they've got these people from Hollywood, journalists, all these people, not people that are connected to the Adventist church, most of them not even probably Christians. And as the story ends, there was this eruption of applause. People stood to their feet. For 10 minutes, people stood, standing ovation for this movie, the story of this man's life. Like tears in their eyes. There's like, who is this person? Right? This person that would risk everything. And for those of you who don't know, Desmond Doss, one of the main core of the story is that Desmond Doss said, I won't take life. I won't take life. And so the army said, fair enough. We know other idiots like you, so go do something else. Right? The modern American military doesn't force you. They're got enough people, right? If you've got religious scruples, don't want to kill, fair enough. We'll go let you work, for the Boy Scouts for 4 years or whatever, for your term of being drafted. So they told Doss, good, go. We don't want you. And Doss said, no, I want to serve. I believe in serving my country. I believe in doing what I think is right for America. I just don't want to pull the trigger myself. I'll come and I want to save life. I want to serve my country by saving life, not taking life. And they're like, you're an idiot. And the book, if you've read it, it brings it out. The people in his unit hated him. He'd be praying at night, and they'd throw combat boots at his head and beat on him and stuff. People hated him. One of his commanders told him, says, if you don't get shot on that battlefield, I'm going to shoot you at some point, right? It's like, you're not being by me. You're not standing by me on that battlefield because you're a coward. You're not willing to defend yourself. You're not willing to carry a weapon. And Doss just, stayed. He didn't have to stay. So long story short, they end up at the Battle of Okinawa on the top of this big escarpment, this huge mountain there. And one of the most brutal battles of the Second World War. And they kind of fought back and forth and back and forth. And one day, the battle got really savage. The Japanese had kind of used this trick to lure all the American soldiers in, pounced on them, just massive casualties. And it got so bad that these were battle-hardened soldiers. People began like jumping off the cliff, like to get away from the carnage. It was that bad. People were like climbing down these ropes they had strung up there, like just absolute panic. That's how frightening. And these guys aren't new. These guys have fought in horrible battles in the Pacific. It's that bad. And so they left their buddies on the hill, right? You don't do that in the military. They left their buddies to die up on the hill. They were that scared. It was that bad. And then suddenly, someone calls out, "Doss is still up there." Like, "Get down here, you idiot. What are you doing up there?" And he looks over and disappears. They're like, "Where did he go? He's so weird." A few minutes later, they see him again, and he's doing something, and they look, and he's like pushing a person over the edge. They're like, "Oh, maybe it's a Japanese. Throw him off the edge. Good call." Nope, it's an American. "What are you doing?" Lowers him down. He's on his rope. What in the world? And they can see he's got this rope tied around the guy. He's lowering this wounded person down. People are like, "What is going on?" And so everyone starts like, "What is Doss doing?" And everyone starts gathering around looking up. And for hour after hour after hour, this man ran back into battle as the Japanese are shooting at this guy, trying to kill him, climbing along the ground, clawing his way through the carnage, and finding someone else who's still breathing, pulling him off the battlefield and lowering them over the edge of this cliff. For hour after hour after hour. He said later that he was just so terrified. I mean, he was absolutely terrified of what was going on. But he just kept praying this prayer. He said, "Please, God, let me get one more. Please, God, let me get one more." And as other people had been storming onto the battlefield, "Please, God, let me kill one more." Doss prayed the prayer, "Please, God, let me save one more." And he was lowering these people off. Over time, as the gentleman said, he lowered down somewhere between like 50 and 100 people. Just absolutely insane. The next day, they went back up to fight again. Doss went again, right? And again, he's not carrying a weapon. He's running into battle without a weapon. And as they're out there fighting on this battlefield again, someone throws a grenade, and it comes flying over, and Doss realized there's nothing he could do. His buddies are there. And so he jumped, and he put his foot on the grenade and turned his face just as it went off and blew his leg apart. So, like, he's fallen down. They're like, "No, Doss," because by this time, they're like, "This is the most amazing guy we know. Like, who is this guy? Who would do this?" And so they grab the guy, put him on a stretcher, and they're pulling him off the battlefield. He's got a blasted leg, shrapnel all through his body. And as he's, like, half conscious laying on this stretcher, he looks over and he sees another guy that's been wounded laying on the battlefield. He yells at the guy, he says, "Stop, I want you to take him. He looks worse than me." And they're like, "You're an idiot. Stay on here." So he rolls off the stretcher. He like bails on the stretcher onto the ground, crashes down onto the ground. They're like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "You can't take me, take that guy." So he claws his way over to the guy, patches the guy up as he himself is like bleeding, forces them to put this guy on the stretcher and take him. He laid out on the battlefield for hours, forcing them to take other people. So they finally take him off the battlefield hours later, and he's out on this ship, this hospital ship finally. They got him patched up, and some of his friends come to see him. They're like, "We got to go see this guy," right? This is the guy they called a coward. This is the guy they said they'd shoot themselves because they thought he was an idiot. And they come out there just like absolutely blown away about who this guy is. And they can tell he's kind of sad, kind of depressed. They're like, "What's going on, man? Why are you so like down?" I think he was usually real chipper. He's like, "I'm just so bummed out. I lost my Bible." He had this little Bible carried in his pocket of his uniform. He's like, "I don't know where it is. It fell out on the battlefield somewhere. I don't know where it is." And these guys are like, "Dude, we're going to get that Bible. Seriously." The battlefield's still there. They're still fighting. There's explosions. These guys get a bunch of their buddies from Doss's unit and said, "We're going to go find his Bible." And they go like running back into battle to risk their lives to find this Bible. And it's like this total ridiculous movie scene. I hope they put it in the movie, right? They're like, "Where's the Bible?" Saving Private Bible. There it is. And we're out, right? Like they literally risk their lives to save Doss's Bible. Like, you buy a new one. It's not that big of a deal, right? But they're like, "This dude has done everything for us. We're going to risk our lives to get this Bible for him." I mean, you're an absolute hero. People loved him. There's a documentary that you can watch if you don't want to watch kind of the carnage of this movie. There's a really good documentary that's not violent. But they actually interview a lot of these guys that served with Doss. And you watch them as they're talking about him, just tearing up, saying, "This, I've never known a man like this. Like, if I could be half the man that he was." Like, we thought he was a coward, and he ended up having a bravery that none of us could have imagined ever in our own hearts. Doss wasn't willing to just be fair, right? The Japanese army had done some terrible things. My grandfather was at Pearl Harbor when it was bombed. Never really let that go. Which I can't, is what it is. Terrible things happened. And yet Doss, in that moment where there was good, there was evil, and Doss said, "I'm not saying you shouldn't go fight." He said, "I'm just telling you from my own conscience, I can't, in good conscience as a follower of Jesus, take life. I want to save life." And the question for us is this. There's a lot of people that are going to watch that movie, right? And just like the people that saw the premiere, I think there's going to be like this amazement, like, wow, what an amazing person. Someone that would risk their life. They're not like anti-war. They're not anti-government, but they're not willing to actually take life. To risk your life? To save life? Wait, what is this? What a cool guy. I mean, I can imagine someone coming over, they've got an Adventist friend, right? Come over, neighbor, like, "Hey, I saw that movie about Desmond Doss at Hacksaw Ridge." Like, "Man, that is so cool what you guys believe." And the reality is that today, most Adventists, we would have to say, is that what we believe? Things have shifted drastically. And my challenge for us on that account is this: not that you need to do what Doss did. I think there is a point where you have to follow your own conscience. But the reality is there is this tradition in the Adventist church where we've said we don't claim that government has no right to wage war. We don't even say that we won't be involved. A lot of other religions do that. The Quakers, the Mennonites, they say we won't even pay taxes to support war. We just think it's that bad. Whereas the Adventist church is how he's taken this kind of strange middle position where we say we'll pay our taxes. If we're drafted, we'll serve, absolutely. But we ask to not be forced to kill. I want to show you a couple quotes here real quick, and we're running a little late, and I apologize, but we'll get through these real fast here. I think it's important. This is a bit of the history of kind of the Adventist position on whether we should be involved in war and how we should. And again, I pray that you'll just hear this out. Starts out here, at the beginning of the Civil War, it says this. It says, Seventh-day Adventists are rigidly anti-slavery, loyal to the government, in sympathy with it against the rebellion. My family all fought for the South. Probably some of you guys did here too, so we're like, what? I don't want to be Adventist anymore. South will rise again, right? But the reality is that the Adventist church at that point was only in New England. You didn't have people outside that region. So they were very united. They saw the Civil War as a very clear-cut thing. Slavery needs to stop. They said, you shouldn't rebel against the government. We need to stop that. So they believed it was very clearly that the Union was in the right, the Confederacy was in the wrong. And again, I'm not arguing that today. I'm not interested in starting that can of worms, right, historically speaking. But that's what the church believed. It was very clear. Kind of next one. So in that belief, this is we support the government, we want them to go off and do this, but they said this. It is James White. He says, it would be madness to resist the draft. They started the draft around 1862 here. It is Christ-like to honor every good law of our land, said Jesus, render therefore to Caesar the things which are Caesar's. Those who are loyal to the government of heaven, true to the Constitution, are the last men to sneak off to Canada or to Europe or to stand trembling in their shoes for fear of the military draft, right? So were Adventists anti-government? Does it sound like they're anti-government, anti-war, anti-draft? No, and the reason that James White felt the need to really kind of make this clear was that there were religions that did. The Quakers were bigger back then than they are now. Everyone knew the Quakers won't fight. The Mennonites. There were religions that said we shouldn't bear arms. The Adventist church said, okay, we're not like them. We're kind of a bit unique. So they felt the need to explain it. So James White puts out the statement to Adventists, because a lot of Adventists had said at that time, I'm going to fight the draft. If they try to draft me, I'm going to, I'd rather die than be drafted. And James White says, well, no, you shouldn't do that. Right? So there's kind of this weird position he takes, or kind of a tension. The next one says this. Ellen White's son, looking back on the time when Ellen White and James kind of went through all these, says this. A man entered the army volunteering, so not being drafted, but volunteering. His service at the same time became without reservation, subject to the orders of his officers. There was a sharp conflict with the fourth commandment and the what? So what did the early Adventists believe? Was the sixth commandment violated in war, according to the early Adventists? And again, I'm not saying that that's true, but historically speaking, is that what they believed according to this? This is Ellen White's own child saying, this is what my parents believed. You couldn't keep the Sabbath in war. They'd fight on Sabbath. You couldn't keep from killing in war. And in their mind, they said, that's murder still. So we kind of go on here. Ellen White herself said this, I was shown that God's people who are his peculiar treasure cannot engage in this perplexing war. So people said, man, we believe we should go and free the slaves. Should we go fight? And Ellen White said what? You can't. Because according to her, they couldn't do that without violating the fourth or the sixth commandment. So the Adventist church took a really hard stance on this, right? Is there much gray area there? This was not something they viewed as debatable. And you see it play out afterwards. This next slide here I want to show you. This is in the Review and Herald right after the Civil War, 1865. You can see this is they're reporting some church business. It says, as voluntary enlistment into the service is contrary to the principles of faith and practices of the Seventh-day Adventists, as contained in the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus, they cannot retain those within their communion who so enlist. Enoch Hayes was therefore excluded from membership of the Battle Creek Church by unanimous vote of the church, March 4th, 1865. Any gray area there for how they felt? Pretty strong. They literally kicked people out of the church who volunteered to go serve in the Union Army to fight for a cause that they thought was a good cause, right? Quite uncomfortable to read as we look back on that. So that's where that's the Civil War, not much gray area. So we kind of go on in church history here. The next kind of major event that happened was World War I. And this is in 1917, what the executive committee said. This is what they released. They said, we have been non-combatants throughout our history. During the Civil War, our people officially declared this, that we recognize civil government as ordained of God, that order, justice, and quiet may be maintained in the land. In accordance with this fact, we acknowledge the justice in rendering tribute, custom, honor, and reverence to the civil power as enjoined in the New Testament. So they're saying, we're not like the Mennonites, we're not like the Quakers. We support the government, but, this is what it says. Next slide. While we thus cheerfully render to Caesar the things which Scripture shows to be his, we are compelled to decline all participation in acts of war and bloodshed as being inconsistent with the duties enjoined upon us by our divine master toward our enemies and all mankind. So the church said, based on what Jesus has told us how to treat all mankind, including our enemies, we don't feel that we can in good conscience kill our enemies. And so they said, we're non-combatants. Again, this is what the church said, the official statement, 1917. So it jumps up to the Second World War, kind of like following through here. 1942. So as the war is kind of cranking up here, people are looking at what they should do. This is what the church recommends. They say, Seventh-day Adventists conscientiously believe that they should not bear arms or go forth on missions of destruction, but rather believe that their mission is the same as that of their master. As he stated in this words, the Son of Man has not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. It's like Desmond Doss, right? So he was holding to what he saw as the church's position. He believed. Seventh-day Adventists seek exemption from combat service. So again, they're making it clear. They're not trying to be exempt from the army. They'll serve. They'll risk their lives for their nation like anyone will. But they're saying, we don't want to be the ones carrying the guns in combat service because the teachings and example of their master, so our master, were in both word and deed opposed to such a course. So do you see kind of a consistency following through here? Civil War on up. And with the Civil War, the interesting thing was that the church was actually incorporated in what year? Any church history nerds? 1863. Up until that point, the church had avoided incorporating. We don't want to have like an incorporation, a legal entity. We're followers of God. We have these beliefs. We want to spread the gospel, the three angels message, but we're not like a traditional church. We're a movement. But when the Civil War came about, they said, we don't want our members to have to serve, but the government would not allow someone to be a non-combatant unless they were part of an official church that had that teaching. So if you were like, a Baptist or a Catholic and said, I don't want to serve, they're like, too bad, your pastor said you can, you're in, you got to serve, right? Or if you didn't go to church, I'm just not a Christian, I don't want to serve. They're like, you're drafted, get on the battlefield, you ding-dong, right? But the American government has always tried to make space for religious belief, and they say, okay, if you're part of a church that says no combat, we'll honor that. And so the Adventist church, because of that, and only because of that, finally decided to become Seventh-day Adventist Church, right? Kind of an interesting little thing. So that's how committed they were to this idea. They're like, we'll kind of jump over our scruples to say we don't want to be official. We'll make ourselves official for that. So from that up to the Second World War, you see this kind of consistency. It goes on then into the Vietnam War. This is kind of what happens next. 1972, as the annual council in Mexico City said this: genuine Christianity manifests itself in good citizenship, loyalty to civil government. So the church has always been obsessed. We are not pacifists. We are not anti-war, right? They said, but, and it kind of goes on, the breaking out of war among men in no way alters the Christian's supreme allegiance and responsibility to God, right? So again, a similar thought here. Following their divine master in not taking human life, but rendering all possible service to save it, asking only that they may serve in capacities which do not violate their conscientious conviction. And then it goes on now. This is where things change suddenly. This is 1972. This statement, the one above that we just read, is not a rigid position binding church members, but giving guidance, leaving the individual members free to assess the situation for himself. You see a change? A change in tone, a change in belief? Absolutely. And what I want to make clear today, I hope you understand this, is I'm not saying we necessarily need to go back to that. My personal bias, and I feel like I need to share that, just so you don't think I have a bias I don't have. My personal bias is I prefer this last statement a lot more, because I err on the side of I want your conscience to be free. I don't want to tell you this is right, this is wrong, unless it's so clear in Scripture. I'm not going to tell someone, it's up to you whether you literally murder or not, right? But if there's any gray area at all, I want to leave you free for myself to make that choice. So I'm more comfortable with that, but I have to ask myself, am I comfortable with that last statement because it fits my bias, which it does, or because it's right? Because this is the question I think we need to assess for ourselves. The reality is there is a tension. If you look in the Old Testament, does God command war or does he not? He does. Would God literally command someone to commit adultery under any circumstances? Was there any time he's like, well, adultery's bad, but in this situation, you should commit adultery because it's good? Would he do that? Clearly not. And so the fact that God would say there was a time, there was a place where God himself said you need to kill these people, for me, makes me have a hard time being able to say war is automatically just always bad, that it's always wrong. Does that make sense? But then I get to the New Testament, and it's equally awkward. Can you imagine Jesus bayoneting somebody? A 14-year-old boy on a battlefield, little Confederate soldier. Could you imagine him bayoneting that little boy? Or a 50-year-old man from Minnesota with 3 kids back at home. He's just fighting, he thinks, for the right cause. Imagine Jesus bayoneting that guy. Because we like to think about battlefields with demons on there. The other side's evil and nasty. And there's those moments. But in reality, generally, governments fight and then throw all our young boys out there to murder each other over things that we probably should have dealt with before. Right? So the last thing I want to do is demonize those people that are literally willing to risk their lives for what they believe is right. I'm super proud of anyone that I know that's served in combat, that's risked their life for people. And that's the last thing I want you to go out here is thinking, well, that Pastor Jeff thinks those people shouldn't have done that or they're somehow evil. That is not what I believe at all. But I do believe there is a major tension that we have ignored when it comes to the Christian's responsibility when it comes to war, when it comes to self-defense, when it comes to taking a life for any reason. The Old Testament, that's there. But then there's a super awkward person named Jesus in the New Testament who actually shatters all of that. We can't imagine that Jesus doing those things, but yet the Bible tells us that Jesus is the one that said those things were okay in that moment, right? There's this tension. And I think that the Adventist church has fought to live in that tension in the past. We said, you know what? We're not willing to say that war itself is always wrong. We live in a broken world. Maybe there's a time when you've got to go fight someone who's doing a Holocaust. Maybe there's a time when you need to bomb a city where there's such horrible things happening. Maybe that's true, right? We're not willing as a church to say that's always wrong, like other churches are. That's just always wrong. But we're also not willing just to step comfortably into that other side where we say, man, I serve my country. I'm going to go fight these terrible, horrible people. They're enemies. They're evil, so I'm justified in taking their life. The church hasn't been comfortable saying that in the past either. There's this tension. And I myself am comfortable where the church is now. And when I've had members come to me and ask, what should I do? I encourage them to really think about Jesus, right? To really consider that. And if they can consider Jesus and imagine themselves, still serving their country with combat, then I say, then do that. You need to follow your conscience. But I think we have to ask ourselves, what happens when a neighbor comes to us and says, man, I think I'm really proud of you guys as Adventists. That's a unique position you take, that you would risk your lives but not be willing to take life. And we say, well, we don't actually really believe that anymore as a church, do we? What changed? Maybe the change was good, right? Maybe there's a reason it changed. Maybe that we shouldn't go back to that old position. That's not what I'm arguing. But I want us to go out of here feeling a little bit challenged and wonder, even if I come out with my same belief where I say, yeah, I do believe people should go off and fight. Adventists can fight in war. Fair enough, right? You need to follow your conscience. But if you haven't got over that hurdle first of what about Jesus? Why did Ellen White feel so strongly about that? Then I think we're ignoring that tension that's definitely there. Finally, in closing, Jesus ends with these words. He says, you've heard it said to love your friends and hate your enemies. Makes sense? He says, but I tell you this, I want you to love your enemies. I want you to pray for those who persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. The Bible says when we look at Jesus, we see who? The Father. And Jesus says, I want the world to be able to look at you and me, and they can see the Son, to see the Father, that we represent that reality of the life of God, the way that he lives, the way that he died. Because here's the thing, we see in the moment of the cross, where Jesus is hanging on that cross, we first of all see our safety ripped away. The fact that good people would murder the Son of God, because those people weren't all evil. A lot of them thought what they were doing was right, and we see that in the life of Paul. He literally thought he was doing what was right. He wasn't a bad guy. That good people, convicted, could be led to actually murder in the name of God. We see that in ourselves. That murder is not so far off from us as we would like to see. That those moments of hatred, those moments of categorizing someone and devaluing them, that we're much closer to murder than we are to the character of God himself. And he says all of that is revealed there in the cross, but there's also something else it's absolutely beautiful that's revealed in the cross, and that's the character of God himself. That God would be on the cross, Jesus himself would be on the cross and say, Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. Right? Jesus was being killed because he claimed to be God. He was being killed for blasphemy. What were all the Jews doing who were killing him? What were they committing? Blasphemy. Jesus was literally dying for their sins. The Romans were killing Jesus because he was disrupting their empire. Who has higher authority in this world? Whose empire? God's or Caesar's? So who's disrupting the more important empire by killing the king of that empire? The Romans. Jesus is literally dying for the sins of the Romans, for the sins they think they're convicting him of. Jesus hangs on the cross, and he dies for the sins that we have committed, the wrongs that we have done, those wrongs that the Ten Commandments reveal as they strip away that safety, and we're left, like my friend in the park, saying, I am not what I thought I was. I am a murderer at heart. I am an adulterer. I am a liar. I am a thief. I am all of these things. There's no space. If any of us find space to look at somebody else in the Ten Commandments, we're not seeing ourselves correctly. And God rips all that space away. We're stuck there with no place to move, and we look up and we see a Savior in Jesus Christ himself, as he dies for our sins. Where we deserve death, we're given life. In the verse that was read this morning, choose life. Moses says, I have set out before you death and life. And as we live our lives, life itself sets out before us life and death. As we choose whether to hate or forgive, as we choose whether to value someone, even if we know they're wrong, we choose not to take away their value. We say that person has value in the eyes of God and they deserve Christian charity. Even if they're completely wrong, I'm not going to make excuses for myself. I'm going to give that to them. That's what God does for us. In the cross, we see the perfect example of being faced with the decision of life or death and choosing life. And God challenges each one of us as we face these moral dilemmas of life. And I don't want to discount those. There are many dilemmas in life where we struggle. I feel like I have two bad decisions, right? Do I defend my family or let them be hurt by somebody else? Most of us will never face that, thankfully, right? But those things happen, right? But as we do, I hope as we look at life that we err on the side of choosing life. that people could look at us and say, those Seventh-day Adventists sure do love, don't they? Man, what weird people. I thought they were cowards, but they're braver than anyone I could have imagined. Like, they just live their lives with such generosity and bravery and courage. They'd risk their own life for someone else. Like, that's unbelievable. Choose life. God chose life for you. God chose death for himself so that you could have life. May our hearts be touched by that love of God today, and may we go out and live with that kind of love. Let's pray. God, we thank you that you have chosen life for us, and this is a very uncomfortable topic for many of us, God. There are hard decisions to make in life, and God, we thank you, though, that in all of that, that you do give us your grace and your mercy, and you walk with us. And God, we pray that our eyes would be opened to see your grace towards us, your love towards us, and may that flow through us so that we could be perfect like you in heaven, God, that we could love our enemies like you love your enemies, that we would choose life like you choose life, God. We love you because you first loved us. We ask this in your name, Jesus. Amen.
We trust your relationship with God has been strengthened from what you have heard today. Please visit our website at www.fletchersda.org. May God give you his peace and joy.